Martin came home at 6 o'clock. He said later that he was nervous about telling me he had accepted the presidency of the protest movement, but he need not have worried because I sincerely meant what I said when I told him that night, "You know that whatever you do, you have my backing." Reassured, Martin went to his study. He was to make the main speech at the mass meeting that night. It was now 6:30, and this is the way it was usually to be. He had only 20 minutes to prepare what he thought might be the most decisive speech of his life. He said afterwards that thinking about the responsibility and the reporters and the television cameras, he almost panicked. 5 minutes wasted and only 15 minutes left. At that moment he turned to prayer. He asked God to restore my balance and to be with me in a time when I need your guidance more than ever. How could he make his speech both militant enough to rouse people to action and yet devoid of hate and resentment? He was determined to do both. Interesting. I know we're not looking for it, but this is definitely seems like kind of part of the purpose of this, to get people, to rouse them to action, to get them to act without hate and resentment. So to do something to kind of protest the civil disobedience, but without anger or hate. Martin and Ralph went together to the meeting. When they got within 4 blocks of the Holt Street Baptist Church, there was an enormous traffic jam. 5,000 people stood outside the church listening to the loudspeakers and singing hymns. Inside it was so crowded, Martin told me, the people had to lift Ralph and him above the crowd and pass them from hand to hand over their heads to the platform. The crowd and the singing inspired Martin, and God answered his prayer. Later, Martin said, "That night I understood what other older preachers meant when they said, 'Open your mouth and God will speak for you.'" First, the people sang "Onward, Christian Soldiers" in a tremendous wave of 5,000 voices, and this was followed by a prayer and a reading of the scriptures. Martin was introduced. People applauded. Television lights beat upon him. Without any notes, he began to speak, and once again he told the story of Mrs. Parks, and rehearsed some of the wrongs that Black people were suffering. Then he said, "But there comes a time when people get tired. We are here this evening to say to those who have mistreated us for so long that we are tired. Tired of being segregated and humiliated, tired of being kicked about by the brutal feet of oppression." The audience cheered wildly, and Martin said, "We have no alternative but to protest. We have been amazingly patient, but we came here tonight to be saved from that patience that makes us patient with anything less than freedom and justice." Taking up the challenging newspaper comparison with the White Citizens Council and the Klan, Martin said, "They are protesting for the perpetuation of injustice in the community, so to keep the injustice going. We're protesting for the birth of justice. Their methods lead to violence and lawlessness, so not following the law. But in our protest, there will be no cross burnings. No white person will be taken from his home by a hooded Black mob and brutally murdered. We will be guided by the highest principles of law and order." Having roused the audience for militant action, Martin now set limits upon it. His study of nonviolence and his love of Christ informed his words. He said, "No one must be intimidated to keep them from riding the buses. Our method must be persuasion and not coercion." So he's saying right here, you want to make sure that you're convincing people and not making them feel like they have to do this because something will happen to them. "We will only say to the people, 'Let your conscience be your guide.' Our actions must be guided by the deepest principles of Christian faith. Once again, we must hear the words of Jesus, 'Love your enemies, bless them that curse you, pray for them that despitefully use you.' And if we fail to do this, our protest will end up as meaningless drama on the stage of history, and its memory will be shrouded in the ugly garments of shame. We must not become bitter and end up hating our white brothers. As Booker T. Washington said, 'Let no man pull you so low as to make you hate him.'" Finally, Martin said, "If you were to protest courageously and yet with dignity and Christian love, future historians will say, there lived a great people, the Black people, who injected new meaning and dignity into the veins of civilization. This is our challenge and our overwhelming responsibility." As Martin finished speaking, the audience rose, cheering in exultation, and in that speech, my husband set the keynote and the tempo of the movement he was to lead from Montgomery onward. So now that I've read this entire text, I need to go back and think about what the main idea is. So at the end, it's kind of saying that Martin Luther King Jr. really set the tempo for this movement, and it's all about that. But I want to think about all of my clues to make sure that I'm understanding the main idea. So the title is Montgomery Bus Boycott. And even though Martin Luther King Jr. isn't present throughout the whole text does have to do with how this boycott started everything. So now I need to find some text evidence. I'm going to highlight it in yellow that talks about my main idea. So let's see. I feel like if I'm thinking about the boycott, I want to go to where they are talking about maybe creating the boycott. So let's see. If I go down to, oh, okay. So this doesn't have to do with Martin Luther King Jr., but E.D. Nixon said, "We have taken this type of thing for too long. I feel the time has come to boycott the buses." That definitely, I think, adds to my main idea. But I think that I can probably find at least one or two more that also add to my main idea. So let me find one more, and then I'll let you find a third one on your own. So I want to think more about this bus boycott. This is kind of where it started. Let's see. Kind of want to know. Let's look at what they say. So describing the reasons for the boycott. That could be part of it, where he's describing the reasons of the boycott. Yep, I think maybe this would be another good one. Everyone unanimously agreed for a boycott? I wonder if I should do that, or I wonder if I should pick the part where he's talking about the feeling behind the boycott. I think I want to look, instead of just saying something that says about taking part in it, which is here, that's okay, but I think I want to find text evidence that talks about how he thought people should act about the boycott. So let's see. This is the part where they're telling people that they should boycott. Okay, here's where I'm thinking about. So alone in his study, he struggled with the question of whether or not it's basically unchristian. Oh, okay. I really like how he explains. So Coretta Scott King explains her husband's ideas by using a quote. This is definitely something I want to highlight. So where she says, I have to find it again. "We were using it to give birth to freedom and to urge men to comply with the law of the land. Our concern was not to put the bus company out of business, but to put justice in business." I love that. So it's kind of, this talks about the purpose behind it. I think that's another good purpose. Now you should find another main idea. Oh, I'm sorry. This is kind of still the main idea, not the purpose. I'm using the wrong word for it. So this is a main idea of what this boycott should look like. And now later, I think that he goes into even more detail about it when he talks about his speech at the church. And he really outlines what it should look like as far as what the boycott should be and what it shouldn't be. I think that would be a great thing to do for another main idea, if you'd like. And then some supporting ideas if you're looking at how they weave Rosa Parks' story throughout and how Martin is responding, or well, she calls him Martin because it's her husband, but how Martin Luther King is responding to these things. So I'm going to leave that to you to see, do you need any more text evidence for your main idea? Do you need some more supporting ideas? And you can always go through and listen to it again and take text evidence while you follow along with me reading it as well. If you have any questions, please feel free to write in the chat if we're in class, or if you're watching this outside of class, please feel free to send me an email if you need any help with this.